Washington, D.C., the morning sun cast long shadows across the Supreme Court steps as a new controversy rippled through the Capitol. Former President Donald J. Trump, never one to shy away from political confrontation, had just launched one of his most scathing critiques yet, this time at none other than Chief Justice John Roberts. "It's the end for Roberts. He's finished," Trump declared during a fiery interview on Truth Social Live, his media platform. "He betrayed the Constitution and the American people see right through it." The comments came just days after the Supreme Court declined to hear a challenge related to the 2024 presidential election rules in several battleground states, rules that Trump and his allies claim unfairly benefit Democrats. Chief Justice Roberts, in a rare public statement, had defended the court's refusal, citing judicial restraint and a lack of standing. But for Trump, that explanation rang hollow. What good is a Supreme Court if it won't step in to defend elections? Trump fumed, his voice rising. John Roberts wants to stay neutral? That's cowardice, not leadership. As Trump's comments made headlines, legal scholars, political analysts, and conservative influencers began weighing in. Some called it a dangerous assault on judicial independence. Others saw it as the latest battle in an ongoing war between Trump and the establishment. The backlash and support was immediate. Within hours of Trump's remarks, conservative media was ablaze. Tucker Carlson dedicated his entire opening monologue to the issue, asking, "Is John Roberts truly a conservative, or just another D.C. insider protecting the system?" Across platforms like X, formerly Twitter, and Rumble, hashtags like #RobertsResign and #TrumpWasRight began trending. Steve Bannon, on his War Room podcast, took it even further. "Roberts has become the new symbol of controlled opposition. He looks like one of us, but when it counts, he folds. The MAGA movement sees it and we won't forget." At the same time, establishment Republicans were scrambling. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell released a carefully worded statement defending Roberts, saying, "The Chief Justice has served this country with integrity. Public attacks on the judiciary undermine our institutions." But others in the GOP were less diplomatic. Senator Josh Hawley told reporters, "There's growing frustration in the base. They feel abandoned. And frankly, they're not wrong." Hawley stopped short of criticizing Roberts directly but acknowledged that faith in the court is eroding fast. Behind closed doors, sources close to Roberts revealed he was deeply concerned, but not shaken. "The chief will not be drawn into a political shouting match," one clerk said anonymously. "He believes the court must rise above this." Still, the damage was spreading, and Trump was far from done. 2 days after his initial comments, Trump returned to the offensive with a vengeance. At a rally in Des Moines, Iowa, his first major public event since the controversy erupted, he made Chief Justice Roberts the centerpiece of his speech. With thousands of supporters chanting, "Drain the court," Trump pointed skyward and roared into the microphone, "John Roberts has betrayed us more than the Democrats ever could. He handed them power when he could have stopped it. We don't need weak judges, we need fighters." He accused Roberts of being owned by the deep state and more interested in cocktail parties in Georgetown than the American people. The crowd erupted. Red hats flew in the air. Signs reading "America First means every branch" waved in unison. In a particularly charged moment, Trump floated the idea of judicial term limits, something he had rarely addressed before. "Maybe it's time we start talking about change at the very top. Why should one man hold that much power for life?" That remark sent shockwaves through Washington. By the next morning, Trump's remarks were being dissected on every major network. Legal experts warned that questioning lifetime tenure could open a dangerous precedent. But to Trump's base, it was a rallying cry. Meanwhile, allies close to the former president hinted that if he were to win re-election, restructuring the judiciary could become a key plank of his second-term agenda. And John Roberts? He remained silent, publicly. But inside the Supreme Court, the atmosphere had grown tense, bordering on fractured. Inside the Supreme Court, the mood was more than tense, it was historic. Clerks moved through the marble corridors with hushed urgency, aware that the eyes of the nation were now trained not just on Roberts, but on the entire judiciary. For decades, the court had maintained its image as an impartial arbiter, above the noise of political warfare. But Trump's scorched-earth attack had pierced that illusion. Sources close to the justices described a visible rift. While Roberts reportedly urged his colleagues to hold firm and remain apolitical, some of the conservative justices, particularly Justices Alito and Thomas, were privately sympathetic to Trump's frustrations. "There's a growing concern that the court is losing its moral clarity," one staffer said under condition of anonymity. Not because of Trump, but because the public believes it has. The media began speculating about divisions within the court. Editorials from both the Wall Street Journal and New York Times questioned whether Roberts had overcorrected in his efforts to protect the court's neutrality, at the cost of his credibility with conservatives. Progressive activists, meanwhile, seized the opportunity. Several left-wing groups launched campaigns urging Congress to take Trump's suggestion of term limits seriously. One group, Reform the Bench, published ads asking, "If Trump and the far right can bully the court, what hope does democracy have?" Amid the swirling pressure, Roberts continued to avoid the cameras. But insiders said the Chief Justice was working behind the scenes to shore up institutional unity. He had reportedly held private meetings with Justices Kavanaugh and Barrett, urging restraint and a reaffirmation of judicial independence. Still, the message from Mar-a-Lago was clear. This wasn't just a feud, it was a war for the soul of the court. In the days that followed Trump's rally, Washington was consumed by a single question. Was the Supreme Court still untouchable? The answer increasingly seemed to be no. Trump intensified his offensive, releasing a 5-minute video directly targeting John Roberts. Set to dramatic music and intercut with headlines about controversial Supreme Court decisions, the video accused Roberts of protecting the swamp, undermining election integrity, and failing when it mattered most. It ended with Trump's voice declaring, "We will restore justice, not just in name but in action." Within 24 hours, the video had racked up millions of views on Truth Social and other conservative platforms. His followers shared it relentlessly, framing Roberts as the face of judicial betrayal. But what startled many political observers wasn't just the content of Trump's campaign, it was the traction it gained inside the GOP. Several members of the House Freedom Caucus publicly backed Trump's criticism. Representative Matt Gaetz went on Newsmax to say, "John Roberts has gone rogue. He's not protecting the Constitution. He's protecting legacy media headlines and his own reputation. Trump's right, it's time for bold judicial reform." Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene took it a step further, introducing a symbolic House resolution calling for constitutional reconsideration of Supreme Court tenure. Though it had no legal weight, the message was clear. Roberts was now a political target. Meanwhile, in the Senate, J.D. Vance and Ted Cruz walked a careful line. They didn't directly attack Roberts, but they didn't defend him either. Instead, they spoke vaguely about the need for restoring trust in institutions and re-examining judicial overreach. On the other side, Democratic leaders were stunned and quietly alarmed. Senator Chuck Schumer issued a sharp statement. "This isn't just Trump versus Roberts. It's Trump versus judicial independence. If we allow one man to delegitimize the Supreme Court for personal gain, we all lose." Still, even Schumer privately admitted to allies that the attack was having an effect. Polls began to show a dip in public confidence in the court, especially among Republicans. Roberts, once seen as the cautious glue holding a fragile institution together, now faced skepticism from the very party that had once championed his appointment. Amid this political storm, Roberts convened a rare closed-door meeting with all 9 justices. According to court insiders, it lasted nearly 4 hours. The chief reportedly spoke candidly about the court's perilous position, its public perception, its internal unity, and its future. He didn't name Trump directly, one source said, but everyone knew who he meant. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, known for her tightrope act between originalism and institutionalism, was said to have voiced concern about becoming pawns in a larger political game. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson reportedly urged her colleagues to resist all pressure, left or right. Only Clarence Thomas remained largely silent during the meeting. By the end of the week, Trump's team announced plans for a judicial reform town hall in Arizona, signaling that the war on Roberts and the court itself was far from over. One aide put it bluntly. "This isn't just about one man in a robe. It's about reasserting the will of the people against a system that thinks it's untouchable." And for John Roberts, the quiet, cerebral jurist who had long tried to keep politics away from the bench, that warning was impossible to ignore. The silence couldn't last forever. After weeks of mounting pressure, swirling speculation, and blistering attacks from Trump and his allies, Chief Justice John Roberts broke his silence. Not with a fiery speech or press conference, but with a carefully composed address at the annual Judicial Conference in Philadelphia. The room, filled with judges, legal scholars, and reporters, was tense before Roberts even stepped to the podium. His face was stoic, his words measured. The judiciary was never meant to be popular. It was meant to be principled. He paused. We are not elected officials. We are not part of a campaign. Our duty is not to appease anger or bow to influence, no matter how loud or sustained it may be. Though he didn't mention Trump by name, the implication was unmistakable. Roberts defended the court's refusal to intervene in election-related lawsuits as a commitment to jurisdiction, not politics, and warned that the survival of our system depends on the courage to do nothing when action would be lawless. He closed with a subtle but unmistakable warning. If we bend to political pressure, if we begin ruling not by law but by loyalty, we become something else entirely. And the Republic will suffer for it. The speech drew immediate praise from establishment figures. President Biden called it a reaffirmation of constitutional courage. Senator Mitt Romney described it as a voice of sanity in a season of madness. But in Trump world, the backlash was instant and vicious. On Truth Social, Trump posted in all caps, "John Roberts is still hiding. He won't say my name because he knows he's guilty. The court failed the country and no speech will erase that." Steve Bannon went further, accusing Roberts of gaslighting the American people. He's defending the system, not the truth. And the American people see through it. But outside the Beltway, things were beginning to shift. A new poll showed that while Trump's base remained hostile to the court, a broader segment of Republican voters were growing uneasy with the tone of the attacks. 41% of independents said they were more likely to support judicial independence after hearing Roberts' remarks. Meanwhile, several conservative legal organizations, including the Federalist Society, issued quiet but firm statements supporting Roberts' principles, even if they disagreed with the court's decisions. "The rule of law must stand above the noise," read one editorial, "even when the noise comes from a former president." Yet the conflict was far from over. Trump, sensing both momentum and pushback, teased a new accountability agenda that he promised to unveil at the Republican National Convention. Insiders said it would include proposals for judicial term limits, mandatory reviews of justices' ethical alignment with constitutionalist values, and possibly even a plan to challenge Roberts' fitness to serve. As the nation inched closer to another historic election, one thing was clear. The battle between Trump and Roberts wasn't just about the past, it was about the future of American power itself. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Republican National Convention had always been a stage for spectacle, but this year it felt like something more, a final showdown. Thousands packed the Fiserv Forum as Donald Trump took the stage to accept the Republican nomination. The crowd was electric, waving flags and chanting USA and "Save the Court" before he even spoke a word. But everyone knew what was coming. Trump had promised something big. He didn't disappoint. "Tonight," Trump said, voice steady, "I am not just accepting your nomination for president. I am launching the first step of a movement to reclaim justice in America, starting with the Supreme Court." A massive graphic appeared behind him, "Truth and Justice, a new judiciary agenda." He laid it out in 4 points. Judicial term limits, no justice should serve for life, Trump said. "That's not democracy, that's royalty in robes." Ethical Certification Board, a Trump proposed panel would evaluate justices' constitutional fidelity, including anonymous annual reviews. Emergency Recall Amendment, Trump called for a constitutional amendment allowing Congress, with a 2/3 vote, to recall any justice deemed derelict in duty. Roberts Accountability Act, a symbolic piece of legislation, drafted but dead on arrival, that would formally censure the Chief Justice and call for his resignation. The crowd erupted. Delegates on the floor waved signs that read, "Finish the court swamp," and "Roberts must go." But even beyond the convention hall, shockwaves reverberated. Legal experts quickly called Trump's plan unconstitutional theater. The American Bar Association denounced it as a dangerous assault on separation of powers. Even some conservatives, like Senator Mike Lee, cautioned that judicial reform must come through dialogue, not vendetta. But to Trump's base it was gospel. Polls released the next day showed a massive spike in support for term limits among Republicans. 74% in favor, up from 42% the month before. Chief Justice Roberts, back in Washington, reportedly watched the speech from his chambers. A court source said he appeared composed but deeply concerned, and that a private meeting among the justices was scheduled for the following week. Justice Sotomayor was said to have remarked privately, "This is no longer politics. This is institutional survival." Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Democratic leaders met in an emergency caucus to discuss how to respond. Whispers of court-packing threats re-emerged. Progressives saw Trump's gambit as proof that the court had already been politicized, so why not add justices? Suddenly, what had started as a one-sided feud was on the verge of tearing through every branch of government. And as the election loomed, America was left teetering on the edge of a new constitutional crisis. The courts were no longer a referee in the national drama, they were the battlefield. November 5, 2024, the results were in. Donald Trump had won. Narrowly but definitively. Victories in Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia gave him the electoral edge. The country was split nearly down the middle, but the Republican Party, his Republican Party, was now fully in control. The White House, the House of Representatives, and a razor-thin majority in the Senate. But the bigger question was not who won. It was what came next. In his victory speech at Trump Tower, flanked by family and key allies, Trump spoke not only of jobs and immigration, but of the court. The people have spoken, he said, voice confident. And they've said loud and clear, the system is broken. We will reform the courts. We will restore justice. And we will hold those who failed our nation accountable. Applause thundered, but across the city and the country, many watched in stunned silence. Back in Washington, Chief Justice John Roberts sat at his desk, the glow of cable news flickering against his shelves of law books. He had expected this. He had prepared for it. But now, the war he had once tried to avoid was coming directly to his doorstep. Roberts issued a rare post-election statement. The Supreme Court does not answer to political tides. We are guardians of the Constitution, not enforcers of popularity. But it sounded, even to some of his own clerks, like a voice trying to hold back a flood. Within 2 weeks, President-elect Trump unveiled his Judicial Accountability Executive Task Force, appointing Senator Josh Hawley to lead it. Its mission: draft policy proposals to restructure the relationship between the judiciary and the American people. Its first target: lifetime tenure. Justice Clarence Thomas quietly endorsed the discussion, saying it was healthy to rethink systems in a republic. Justice Kavanaugh remained silent. Justice Barrett gave a short comment to the Federalist: "We must be careful not to solve perception problems with structural overreach." But for Roberts, it was clear. He was now the symbol, not just the leader, of a divided court. In January 2025, with Trump inaugurated for a second term, the fight came to the Senate floor. Hawley introduced a bill, the Constitutional Tenure Reform Act. It would not succeed, not yet. Legal experts warned it was almost certainly unconstitutional. Moderate Republicans balked. Democrats mounted fierce opposition. But it wasn't about passage. It was about pressure. Roberts' name was invoked dozens of times in those debates. Protesters camped outside the Supreme Court with signs reading "End the robe rule," and "You work for us." In private, sources said Roberts had begun to consider the unthinkable, stepping down. Not in surrender but in defense. To protect the court from collapse. "If my resignation restores faith," he reportedly told a colleague, "it may be the highest service I can render." As spring approached, the country braced. Would the Chief Justice resign under pressure from a political movement? Or would he stand his ground until the bitter end? Trump had made his move. Roberts had made his stand. The battle for the soul of the judiciary had been joined. And for the first time in generations, America didn't know where the Constitution would land. June 30, 2025, Washington, D.C. It was a morning like any other in the nation's capital. The summer heat shimmered across the Supreme Court Plaza, and tourists gathered outside for photos, unaware they were about to witness history. At precisely 9 a.m., a one-page letter was released to the press. To the President of the United States, "It has been the honor of my lifetime to serve as Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. I have sought to uphold the Constitution faithfully and without favor. But I have come to believe that my continued presence has become a distraction from the court's vital work and its duty to the American people. With profound respect for the institution I love, I hereby submit my resignation, effective immediately. Sincerely, John G. Roberts, Jr." The news broke the internet. Cable networks went to wall-to-wall coverage. Legal experts were stunned. Allies and critics alike paused. Even Trump, usually quick to post, waited over an hour before commenting. When he finally did, it was short and triumphant. "America is back. Time for a new court and real justice." Later that evening, he gave a televised address flanked by Vice President Elise Stefanik and a row of American flags. "Chief Justice Roberts did the right thing by stepping aside," Trump said. "We now begin the process of restoring the court to reflect the will of the people, not the elite." He promised to nominate a new Chief Justice, in the mold of Scalia, bold, fearless and constitutional to the core. Within days, Trump's shortlist leaked. Ted Cruz, former Solicitor General Noel Francisco and Senator Mike Lee. The Senate, under Republican control, was ready to move fast. But beyond the headlines, something quieter was happening. Inside the Supreme Court, Justice Elena Kagan reportedly walked the empty chambers of Roberts one last time. She later told a confidant, "He tried to hold the center. But the center didn't hold." Justice Barrett, increasingly caught between ideological loyalty and institutional integrity, had grown more reserved. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was said to be working on a dissent, not in a case but in history. And across the nation, Americans watched, divided. To some, Trump's victory over Roberts was a necessary correction, a populist reckoning for an out-of-touch elite. To others, it was a dangerous precedent, the first time in modern history that the judiciary had been openly reshaped by political intimidation, rather than democratic process. Final lines. In his farewell, Roberts left no press conference, no memoir, no interviews. Only a handwritten note tucked beneath his nameplate in the Chief Justice's office. The law cannot roar. But it can endure. If we let it. Whether it would endure, or be rewritten, was now up to those who followed. And the nation they served.